Yeah, I need to figure out what I'm doing here. Okay. Well, thank you all for showing up. First of all, a little bit of a more of an introduction. You may know from the list, I basically comment on things that I do and grow. Um, I'm opinionated, I'm geeky, and I have a twisted sense of humor. So you can bear with me on this one. Um, so I was going to talk about plant sex, but when Barclay posted it, she said it was going to be on starting perennials from seed. So we're going to do a little bit of each. Um, and I'm no expert, um, but when I was in graduate school the first time, we had a joke that an expert was someone from out of town with a rack of slides. That was long before there were PowerPoints. Um, and I am from out of town. However, I did live in DC for 1 year, uh, long before there was a metro. So it's a while back. Um, but the geeky part of me always, and the business part always wants to look at the financials. And seed sales in the country were 1.29 billion in 2024. That was vegetable seeds. And ornamental seeds were only 100th of that amount, approximately. But ornamental plants and flowers was 1,000 times the amount of money was spent on that was spent on seeds. So obviously, that's where the money is. But, and I think the most striking thing is that the growers have to buy seeds too, and home gardeners buy less than half of the uh, spend half of the money on seeds that is spent nationally. The trend, as far as businesses, is that the flowers and plants are going to grow at a much more rapid pace than seed sales. And part of my goal tonight is try to reverse that. And if you're not used to looking at money along the way and gross sales, I just looked this up, and Valentine card sales were $1.7 billion, which is approximately the amount spent on vegetable seeds. How's that for useless information? Anyway, I've been doing this from growing perennials from seeds for over 30 years. This photograph was taken at least 25 years ago, and it's of
Dennis,
Japanese irises.
Dennis, I'm going to stop you here. I need you to
Yes.
share your screen.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not sharing it. I've got to figure out how to do this. I thought I was.
Not
We're in
yet.
the.
I'm
Remember, it
hearing you.
says we can hear you, but I don't. Is it just me who can't see his screen?
Um,
I
Yes.
don't think
No,
you're
I just
No,
sharing.
see
I
Den.
can't
No,
see the
I
stream.
You
can't see
just
it.
see
No,
Dennis.
you cannot see the screen.
Not
you
Let's
can
yet.
see
see.
Dennis, but not the screen.
So there are two steps to that, Dennis. You hit the green share, and then you pick the.
Let's see if I can find this sucker. Let's see.
Y'all aren't going to believe it, but we actually practiced it too.
Yeah, I know how that works. Let's see. Uh, there's a share here and
Yep.
another one. I did it. I had it up earlier, I thought. Let's see. Um,
Come on, you can do it.
I think I can.
We believe
Okay.
in you.
You
Is it
started
there
it.
now?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Great. Well, let's go back and look at some previous screens then. Okay.
Now we can see it.
There. Okay. There we go. Um, we start that there was that's a shot from my garden, and everything you see there was grown from seeds. Then we'll Let's see. Uh, Go to the next slide, explaining the expert, and then sales. It'd be nice to catch this if anyone wanted to see it on the recording. Okay, and this is taken 25 to 30 years ago. That's Japanese irises, and that's one of the first perennials I grew from seed. It was right exciting, to say the least, the first time I saw those. Um, and at that point in time, there was not nearly as much information on how to germinate things. And I ended up going to iris conventions and inquiring with breeders as to what they did so I could learn a little bit about it. Um, and that is one of it took 2 years from seed, but that's one of the flowers from those seedlings that I grew. Okay. Germination of seeds. And this is one of the first, it wasn't the first thing I learned, but it was very important. And that is that the patterns of germination are more affected by where something grows than what its name is. Um, and with irises in particular, I had a correspondence and studied with a couple of iris growers who collected seeds of Virginica and Versicolor from different places and determined that they did not germinate in the same way at all. It was based on whether they were from either from Newfoundland or the Mid-Atlantic. Um, but as I no longer grow irises from seed, but I grow a lot of other perennials. And one of the first things, if you're going to get into this, is we need a little bit of instant gratification. It would be nice to sow something and get a flower the first year or the year that it's sown. And there's many perennials that can grow flower from the first year. Generally, they are short-lived, and many of them can be grown as an annual. Um, and those that don't bloom the first year obviously have to make it through the winter. Many of them have a shorter bloom season, and the plant is in for the long run. There are many plants that we grow as annuals that are really perennials. For example, in my garden, immediately okra comes to mind, as do castor beans. They're both perennials in warmer climates. Um, and so the important thing is that the long-lived perennials come back year after year. Think peonies. Short-lived perennials come back for a few years if you put them in the right place. Um, Echinacea is notoriously short-lived. If you're lucky to get 3 to 5 years out of it, Agastache. A lot of people complain that they can't even get a second year out of it. But um, so if you are in it for the long run, even if you are, you should be growing perennials that are or that you can see what's going on in a hurry. Um, but when you talk about these, this is common. Actually, Rebecca Herta. This is Cherokee Sunset, which is a mix, and depends on which reference you check. It can be described as an annual, a biennial, or a perennial. I'd say 99% of the ones I grow in my garden don't make it till the next year. However, I have not started seed for at least 5 years. I get sometime in April and early May, I go up and dig up volunteers and put them around and move them where I want them to go. Um, but when you start seeds in a place that they're not used to growing, it is an unnatural act. Um, and what you need to do to get them to grow is to emulate Mother Nature. And I started with the Rebecca simply because it always comes back for me. But and I will go over this several more times because you can't overemphasize the importance of knowing where it grows naturally to determine how you're going to grow it. This is purple coneflowers. This photograph was taken April 6th. If you can see, um, I've circled it there. Those are tiny little seedlings coming up. A month later, you can see that there's just a whole host of them here. This is the last year I intend to grow echinacea from seed. I think I have enough of germplasm around so that I'll just let them seed and grow and move them around as I like. Um, but if you look at if this was in early April and early May, the if you look at most references say optimal germination is between 65 and 75 degrees. However, for me, the average high in April, when March and April, when these were germinating, was barely nowhere near the optimal on that. Uh, so I think that frequently we have um, we have this concept of having to have something warm, sort of like talking with Ira earlier about the tomatoes, keeping them warm. Most perennials do not need that. They're better off with the fluctuating temperatures. Um, this is back to the echinaceas again. This is the first year flowering. The selection is Mellow Yellows, which was a gelato seed introduction from probably 10 years ago. And first year that only bloomed at about 12 to 14 inches. And then the second year, and this is one you can see in early April, you're already seeing the blossoms forming on it. And by mid-June, you have covered with flowers on that. So even though you get flower the first year, it's not frequently, it's not going to be nearly as floriferous or spectacular as it is in subsequent years. Um, and you may talk about where you get seeds. Geoseed happens to be one of my favorite sources. It is a commercial, they cater to commercial growers. And the first thing that I always notice about it is that if it's a first year flower, they use the abbreviation FYF, listed at 32 inches, but you have to be really aggressive to get that height the first year. And in a true business sense, and they know their customers, and they talk about uses of it and large containers for marketing, specialty cut flowers, etc. Incidentally, the seeds are about 15 cents a piece from that uh, them. But Baker Creek, you may know, is another seed company. They're actually one of the fastest growing retail seed companies. And their description of what you do with this plant is nothing like uh, Geoseed. They are catering to their market along the way. Um, and you will find pollinators, if you haven't noticed, within the last 10 to 15 years, pollinate, if it's a pollinator, is one of the buzzwords by which you sell plants and seeds. And incidentally, they charge $4 for 15 seeds. Um, this is agastache. This is and it grows to height in the first year. It almost acts like an annual. This was in August of last year, started from seed in March. And then this was taken in April of 25. And you see all these little volunteers around it. Um, in my garden, I do mulch, but not much. I use grass clippings. I never use pre-emergence. So and by the end of the season, the grass clippings are practically gone. I have to grow more grass, cut it, dry it, and in the meantime, I get volunteers. And this is a close up. You can see that germination is over a period of time, and there's variations in the size based on not only the depth of the seed, but the spread and germination. And this is another that reseeds rapidly. This is a first year bloom in early August was the first bloom I got from it. And the following year, this was in early April, and I have a volunteer. This is a big click pin to give you an idea on the size of this. It is variegated, but if you notice, the cotyledon that showed up is solid green, and the variegation on it is reliable, but doesn't show up on the cotyledon, which is actually part of the embryo. And we'll talk about that a little more later. And this is a plant in the same group in May of the second year, and it's already blooming. And this is one of the reasons I really like to grow from seed. This is common catmint over here, and if you'll see, these are seedlings that are coming up. If you see it there, um, oops, I just got out of there. Uh, I think I hit the wrong button.
You're good, Dennis. You just need to put it back
It's there.
into,
Okay.
yeah, just put it back
Let's
into presenter mode and then you'll be good.
okay. Let's see. Start from.
No, you don't want to do that.
Well,
There we go.
I need the current site. Here we go. Okay. The larger catmint here is actually Nepeta parnesia, which is hard to come by. It's a catmint that can grow to, a lot of catalogs will describe it as 4.5 to 5 feet tall, and some will say it can grow up to 7 feet tall. Blooms much later. It doesn't. This was blooming in April, the regular the prostrate catmint. This one doesn't bloom until late summer, but it's great at the back of the border. Does not market well. If you, it it takes at least 2 to 3 years to get it to size, and so I grew it from seed simply because I couldn't get it from elsewhere. Um, okay, and the point on this is that heat mats are not really necessary for most of these. Um, the with many perennials, high temperatures in the soil will impede germination, unlike many annuals or a lot of vegetables and flowers. You just um, don't need that heat. And fluctuating temperatures aid germination. on some things that are difficult to germinate, they'll say keep it warm, and if they don't get germination within a couple of weeks, stick it in the refrigerator for a couple of weeks. And the sometimes I think you're better off to just not put any heat under it at all and just be patient. Um, but if you're in a hurry to get something, you can use the heat mat with it. But I would consider unplugging it. Use always use a thermostat to make sure it doesn't overheat. And every couple of days or every night, you may unplug it um, just to get the temperatures back down again. Um, and then there are some perennials that do not do well in transplant or put down such a long tap root initially that you really have trouble transplanting or getting them out of the pot and into the ground. Oriental poppies are notorious for that. And this is a Oriental poppies that were sown last fall. And yes, that's what my soil looks like. It's a black sandy loam, and the white is grains of sand. The circles there are circling weed seeds that happen to be in the soil. There's a seed here, and one there, and there's a couple of more around if I look hard. But this was taken in late December, and those are the poppies germinating. And if you look at the weather, think about the weather we've had recently, that's the same. Um, I just took this shot a few days. The ice is just melting off of this. That we had 6 inches of snow with ice on top of it, and the poppies continuing to grow. And you see a sprouting there. The seeds haven't come up yet, but anytime you direct sow, um, you have the possible you have weeds are a problem, and the timing with so many annual weeds in particular that will grow more aggressively than the perennial, you're better off to start it in a sterile mix of some sort. So the when you do choose a starting mix, it should be moisture retentive, quick draining, and free of weed seeds. This is my grandmother, and she never used perlite. She didn't use vermiculite. She didn't use peat, but she grew a lot of things from seed, but she always used leaf mold and woods dirt. She would send us to the wood down to the woods behind the house to dig and basically get leaf mold. You could mix your own, uh, and the CBB means I could not be bothered. Couldn't be bothered. There's many commercial products. I use Pro Mix for practically everything. If something really like sharps, sharper drainage, I'll add some vermiculite or a sand uh, to it. Um, and for many seeds have a seed coat that is not permeable, that is hard to let the moisture in. And I'm back in my iris days. One of the first lie I was told that was that there was a uh, inhibitor of germination in the seed that had to be removed by soaking. And there is very little evidence. There is no evidence of that at this point. It's basically just making the seed coat permeable, permeable so that the uh, germination can occur. Uh, in addition, you can have mechanical. Sometimes I'll use sandpaper, just have lay one sheet of sandpaper on the table, put the seeds on it, and then take a block of wood and rub over it to scratch it. Or gourd seeds. I'll take nail clippers and just nick the seed a little bit to, and not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily have to go all the way through. Um, or the I have used acid one time actually for woodies, but you can use either sulfuric or citric acid soaks to uh, break the seed coat. And this is comparable to if you have to, for example, with persimmons or back once again in the woodies or pawpaws. And where fox and animals will eat the fruit and it passes through the intestinal tract with the high acid in the stomach, and that mimics that. There's also some seeds have a waxy coating, and uh, and they may have been be germinated by fire or require fire to germinate. Um, and that's true with some prairie plants in particular. Lead plant comes to mind that you boil water, let the temperature drop to about 180 and literally just pour it over and leave it on the seeds otherwise you won't get germination with it. Um, and then after, if seed, a lot of the seeds we do not need necessarily the coating to be addressed. However, the cold moist stratification is the norm for that. And the I have used a paper towel method where you place the seed on a paper towel and then put it in either a Ziploc bag or a plastic container, stick it in the refrigerator. On occasion, you can have my clock's chiming. The On occasion you can have mold or bacteria grow on that, and if the towel sometimes if you do not have city water, and I'm on well water, you might have serratia bacteria growing and it'll turn red spots on it and will kill the seeds. Um, and so you can mix a little bit of peat with the seeds to inhibit bacterial growth, or alternatively, put a few drops of bleach in a cup of water that you're working with to take care of that. The other alternative is winter sowing, which has become much more of a rage along the way. The most one that's talked about most frequently is the milk jug method, where they take a plastic milk jug, cut it they're on three sides, and then you put your and make sure you have drainage holes in the bottom of it, and you put you sow the seeds in that, and then tape it shut to unscrew, and you wet it, you water it good, put it out in a shady spot in for at least a month during the winter, and then bring it in. And these are digitalis seedlings that came up with that. The problem that I had with it is that all those little seedlings have to be transplanted, or they won't grow well, and there's a lot of work with that. So I no longer, and it's tedious and demanding. Um, I now use my little um, paper method, and I just take newsprint and fold little seed cells and put them in a flat. And I used to use standard full size 10 by 20 flats, but I've switched to these seed trays made by Garland. It's a British company. Uh, and they are rigid, so I don't have the give and twist with them that I did with the larger ones. They also come in a half size and a long, narrow tray, and they're quite convenient. Um, anyway, so back um, once I've filled them and sowed, and most of these are surface sowed or no covered by no more than an eighth of an inch of soil. Uh, Wet them down good, and then I just stack them. This and the top there's drainage holes in the. I put an empty one on top with a brick. This literally was taken just a few weeks when we had the snow, and they just sit there. And when you're ready to, there's moist. It's important that you have moisture regulation, and the with its the um, water should not be allowed to dry out. It doesn't matter if they freeze along the way; it won't hurt them at all. Um, but the moisture regulation, which has to occur throughout the whole phase, it has to be a system that works together, whether it be the container or the size of the drainage holes or the any covers that you may use on it. And once these trays have been brought back in, and I leave them uncovered for a few days until they thaw out, and then so they don't completely dry out. Rather than using a cover, I just throw some saran wrap over them or plastic wrap, and until they germinate. Um, but many perennials require light to germinate, and if you've ever grown from seed, you know that you have a propensity to wonder what's going on. You want to dig in there and see what's happening. But with perennials, you usually can see the seed and you can watch what's happening. If you see here the tiny root hairs there as they're forming, um, so you know what's going on without having to dig in it, which you shouldn't do anyway. Um, Now, the from the trays I showed you earlier, this is a wild lupin, and when I pulled it out, even though it was frozen solid, the seeds were already germinating. And wild lupin, which is native to this area, however, it's rare to see it. Is it is it grows rapidly and germinates at 5 degrees. So it's actively growing. These are hollyhocks, as you can see, and that was only after 5 days of bringing them in, and they were in the pit house, and it's only 55 degrees in there. So you don't, so many perennials, you simply do not need the heat for them to germinate. Um, there are other um, uh, perennials that do need a little bit more heat. This is dianthus that I grew last year. It's rock and rose is the selection, and it grows rapidly. These I used soil blocks, and I use soil blocks for a lot of annuals, very rare, only for quick germinating and quick growing perennials. Dianthus is one. Snapdragons, which are is usually biennial for me, or and dahlias I'll grow in a soil block. Um, but then other than that, just other annuals, because these will germinate in a matter of uh, easily within less than 10 days. This is the same dianthus that I started in January, and that's in July in a bed. Incidentally, this is a bed that I didn't even think of until March, and it was all grassy, and I ran the tiller through, and everything in there was grown from seed. Many were transplanted from elsewhere in the garden. The only exception was liatris that's growing there when I bought corms of that. Um, with the many of the perennials that do not bloom the first year, you're looking at especially when you have small seedlings. This is Betony, Stachys officinalis, and the seedlings. Uh, I don't want to take care of things in pots if I don't have to. And so I line them out in the garden. These are planted about 8 inches on the center. And I have a date with my hoe to keep the weeds down on them. This is second year on it. Um, and it rapidly grows and performs well with that. The nice thing about Betony is that once you have it, just keep dividing it every 2 or 3 years, and it will live for quite a while. Um, Now, we're going to talk about sex a little bit now, but pollination, as I mentioned earlier, is the big buzzword, and we have all sorts of plants that uh, were chosen because they're pollinators, and every catalog you see mentions it. And we know that pollination occurs, fertilization, and seed formation. But when it really gets down to it, all that we really know about it is as much as we knew the first time we crawled in the backseat of a GTO when we were kids. But the fertilization process, and I think this is one of the most beautiful things about flowers, is that unlike uh, the when we crawl in the back seat of the car, which could happen any night of the year, flowers have to do it when they have the chance. And for fertilization to occur, the pollen grain has to provide two pieces of as a dual germination. One is to form the embryo, and the other is to form the endosperm. And with pollen floating around like crazy, the flower in a receptive mood will choose somewhat indiscriminately. However, the endosperm is judicious and says, do we really want to go through this? Um, and I'll talk about that a little bit more along the way. However, the when things work right, this is a Japanese iris that I was breeding, and it actually went a little bit too far and was busting, or the fertilization occurs as it will. Um, but this double fertilization by definition of angiosperms is what really has to happen. And it's the brilliance of what makes the whole category of plants work. In that seed formation, there are differences between monocots and dicots with that, as well as with gymnosperms, which would be your cone-forming plants. Um, and dormancy there's huge variations. Some plants require, some seeds have to dry out to in dormancy to gain for fertility. For example, okra uh, must dry out. I grew some for a seed company a few years back, and the contract required that I meet a 85% germination rate, and I harvested the seed and I tested. I was at about 60%. And I called the company and they said, "Don't worry, if it's 60% now, it'll be 90% by December." And it was at 92% by early December. So even though they're dormant, there's things that sometimes are still going on. Other seed require that they never dry out. Uh, and a lot of it has to do with where it um, grew and developed, as stated earlier. Mm. Um, Now the real geek in me is going to come out. Um, and we talk the monocots, and this to me is one of the most fascinating things about monocots versus dicots. By the way, we'll start with how we are not botanists, we are plantsmen and horticulturalists or hobby gardeners, but we all know monocot and dicot. However, botanists do not use the term dicot anymore. Because of um, advancements in the field, they now call them eudicots, which is U means true, and there's some dicots, magnolia species in particular, that are not eudicots. And I'm not enough of a botanist to explain that. And I suspect as gardeners, uh, even though the term eudicot has been the norm in the botanical circles for at least 10 years, I think I'll be dead before it hits uh, the garden clubs. Um, but the most fascinating thing to me is that monocot seeds store energy in the endosperm, and the endosperm grows because of pollination. And but in dicots, the energy is stored in the cotyledons. Um, and I like to compare it to think of the endosperm as sort of like a placenta. In monocots, it grows and is large. And if you think of grains like corn, wheat, and barley, most of that energy is stored in the endosperm, and it's lower protein, higher carbohydrate and or oil levels in it. And whereas dicots, in the process of forming the embryo, and as it grows, it takes all the energy from the endosperm and stores it in the cotyledons. Um, and this is, I no longer have it. This is a laminar flow hood that I had, and I used to dissect seeds when I was working with Japanese irises, trying to overcome some fertility issues. This is a Japanese iris seed that's been sliced open. And just as you would think of in wheat or something of that sort, this whole area is all energy that the embryo will use to grow. This is you can see a little bit of a indentation here. This is the embryo itself. And once it was sliced out and I popped it out of this is the cotyledon, which was resting in the center of it. And the radical, when it grows out, forms the root. And the epicotyl is the apical meristem. That's where all the top growth occurs. And the radical, which puts down, becomes the root, being a monocot. Uh, that taproot, that's would if it were a dicot, that would form the taproot where all the roots would grow off of it. But in a monocot, it forms more roots from the epicotyl along the way. Now, this is a Roy Davidson seed. It's an iris that I had cut open. Claims it is generally sterile. It is a hybrid with Iris pseudochorus, and it's rare that you get a viable seed. Pseudochorus can be quite invasive, um, so you want to avoid it if possible. But I harvested this seed and cut it open. There is an embryo growing, as I described earlier, uh, and they're anxious. The one pollen grain hit it and it's growing. However, there is no endosperm to support it, so it will die. And the whole idea of doing this was that I was going to try to see if I could rescue that embryo and bring it to life. Anyway, this is back again. This is that didn't work. However, this is a Japanese iris embryo. It may be the same one I showed you earlier. And this is the radical. As in 5 days, it's elongating. You see root hairs forming along the side of it. And this is the epicotyl, which is going to form the leaf. And this is the cotyledon, which would be growing into the endosperm to take energy from it. However, it's growing on agar and actually, was made from a formula, MS formula, which was used based on coconut milk. And coconut is the endosperm in it is liquid. So the milk in a coconut is actually the endosperm in it. And this is 3 days later. You can see the top growth forming here, and the cotyledon is beginning to die because it's not performing any function at that point. And there you can see it's actually growing on. Anyway, that's the end of my geekiness, but everything you see in here is stuff, and most of it is perennial and I grow from seed. And I did not go into all the technical ifs, ands, or whys along the way. It's not nearly as difficult as one might think. the that's a there one of the things that plants I would recommend that you try uh, would be this is a butterfly weed, and even though it's fairly long lived in the garden, if if you get the seeds planted now, there's a good chance you would have bloom before the end of the growing season this year. Um, and I hope that when you look at this, or when you look at the seed pods here, that you would find them just as exciting as the flower here. Anyway, that's enough of this. I would love to hear some questions.
Dennis, there are a lot of questions in the chat. Let me go through some of those,
Okay.
and then we'll do oral questions.
Okay.
And I really appreciate your wonderful talk. And I love that you had a date with a hoe, and I hope Tim approved with that when you had to go in there and deal with the weeds. But I do want to mention that Chris said he grew mellow yellows from Baker Creek, and none of them had yellow flowers. I know that that's something you've dealt with too, where things don't come as advertised.
Well, I have, there was, I've been following seeds and seed production and growth for quite a while. And there are every seed company out there buys and sells from all over the place. And there's real possibilities of things being mislabeled or grown in a situation where you're not going to get what you think you're going to get. Um, I One of the reasons I really like to buy from Chia Seed is because they take their whole reputation depends on it. They basically sell to growers, and if they put a seed out there and somebody loses the whole year's crop because of it, or it's not what they can sell, they're going to be really upset. Um,
Cindy and
so
David asked if you'd ever grown from Southern Exposure Seed Exchange. I sure get their catalog too, but I didn't know
I
you.
actually I grew okra for them. I they're I've bought from them on occasion, and a few years ago I was trying to find the a cultivar of okra that would suit my needs, and I grew Stewart's Z Best from them, and I determined it was my favorite eating okra. And the next year I saw them at Mance, and I their new catalog, and it didn't list it. And I had saved seeds. I had probably 3 or 4 ounces of seeds, and I asked them why they didn't have it in the catalog, and they said there was crop failure. And I said, "Do you want me to grow it for you?" And so I grew 15 pounds of okra seed, and they bought it from me.
That's amazing. I could have bought some of your seed from the catalog, but I know that I've grown that one too because you gave me seed. So thank you.
Mhm.
Carol Allen mentioned that to learn more, we should read Dr. Norman Deno, Seed Germination Theory and Practice. Have you read that volume?
I have, um,
Tell me your
and
thoughts.
I think that it's a little bit dated, even though it is has was the standard for ages on that. I I I actually have it right on the shelf over there. But anyway, it's a great reference, and but it is I think that its time has passed.
Oh, Dennis, I disagree with you. It's
I'm
not,
sure
it's,
it
it's
won't be the
not,
first time we've disagreed.
Dennis, it is not for echinacea, etc. It's for esoterica. And,
Yeah.
if you want to start getting into double and triple dormancies, Dr. Dino has it down.
Oh
So
yeah.
it's not for everybody in the world, but it is really, really good for chasing down esoterica.
Hmm.
Just the seeds that you don't buy at the Ace Hardware store.
Well, the H.L. Hudsons of the world.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. That is exactly for it. So that's why
Yeah.
I said I prefaced it by if you really want to get in the weeds about growing from seed, you check these out and they are online in PDF format. So it's
Yeah.
for geeks like us, Dennis.
Well, I actually am a bit more pragmatic on things. I used to be a plant collector, and I am no longer. I it was my as there was an embarrassing time in my life when if I had less than 100 things waiting to go in my holding garden, I felt like I hadn't bought enough. And I'm past that now. I have more seeds than I should have. Uh, but I'm more focused on growing things that I think there is a broader possibility that I can grow some. The
Now, I see that Marjorie is asking about the heat mats. What about using heat mats for annuals, even if you don't use them for perennials?
oh I actually I do use heat mats for both on occasion, depending on and especially if but annuals. There's some that really, really need a lot of heat. I grow seedless watermelons, and they recommend 90 to 95 degrees for germination. That's pretty damn hot. Uh, and so always use them for that. I use, and for a lot of annuals, I'll use them, but only until they are up. Um, if when you see if the first true leaves are forming, it's time to get them off the mat or to drop the temperature just a little bit. Otherwise, with the combination of the too much heat and not enough light, you'll end up with a straggly plant.
Mm.
Um, I didn't talk much about light, but it's really important that you have good, strong light. Um, I have cold frames that even things that like tomatoes, you don't want them to get much below 36 degrees. But if it's in with a cold frame, if it gets down to 28 or so, you can easily keep your temperature above that with a cold frame. But the amount of the direct sun hitting on that will is cheaper than trying to buy a lighting system that's going to help it keep it growing well. Uh, Cannabis culture, and especially with indoor growing, has been an impetus for the developments in the lighting systems, and they can be outrageously expensive. Over the years, I've used fluorescent grow lights. I've used incandescent. I've used LED. I've used plant LED. And quite honestly, nothing beats the sun. So if you, in a sunny window is not quite enough to keep the of for a real sun loving plant.
Have you
But
grown either betony or agastache?
I beg your pardon?
Have you grown either betony or agastache?
Both.
And do you use them for medicinal uses?
No. I was a druggist for 50 years and I haven't felt the need to use either one of those.
Dennis, can you go back and show us the pale yellow blooming plant at the back of the border? It's not hollyhock, but what is the name of the plant?
Oh, it's a mullein. It's
Okay.
a let's see. Let's see. Previous. That's it right there. The let's see. Let's go back to it's good. Let's see. Um, Go to slide. Well, if I was better at this, could do it. That tall plant
Yes.
is that's mullein, but it's not the common mullein. We talked about it online or on the listserv. It's European native, just as the common mullein that grows here is also densiflora um, is the species, and it grows to about 7 feet tall. It's a biennial. Last year was the first year I had it grow. I grew it, and it's reseeded all over the place. So I'm going to have fun with this one.
Dennis, there are a whole lot of more questions and announcements. I know you don't have the restaurant anymore, so even though it was it not Marydale? Where was your
It was
restaurant?
in Millington.
Millington, thank you. But that's gone now, right?
It's
Or
gone.
yeah.
I'm old. I just couldn't do it.
Yeah. And then we had talked about doing the SunMed Growers Tour, and people are asking about the status of that. I was interested in seeing that with you if you
Well,
wanted to organize it.
the SunMed, um, their director of personnel used to work and was a server in the restaurant. So I have connections there. And um, she, uh, they do not want to schedule more than a month out. So we're aiming for April, and I will approach her at the end of March and or mid March, the end of March, and get dates for the tour. It's going to be a weekday, and I think they usually start at 10 a.m. But
Okay. We'll wait to hear more about that.
yeah,
There are a couple of other announcements, and Chris has a number of questions, and I don't want to miss those. Some of the announcements are from Cindy and David about the phone aboard the Friends of the National Arboretum, and one of our dear friends and members, Jim Hughes, is going on, as well as Harrison Pittman is joining, so that'll be exciting. Take a look at that in the chat. Lauren is going to be offering the garden yoga program on March 5th. That should be lots of fun. I myself know I've been a little stiff over the winter, and I'm looking forward to stretching out in anticipation of getting my garden started. Carol Edwards mentioned that the U.S. Botanic Gardens teams up with the Smithsonian, and each year they have this gorgeous orchid exhibit for a number of weeks, and it goes until mid-April. They cycle it among the museums, and this year we are so lucky because it's going to be at the National Museum for African American History and Culture, and that museum has so many great things to see, and the orchids are going to be lovely. I haven't seen them yet, but I bet that Carol has, and I'm looking forward to going to see those. They switch them out, so they're always in bloom. So the beginning, if they start to fade, they switch them out week to week, so you can go back many times to see new ones. And I think that those are, there are a couple of more things that are some announcements I might have missed, but one of them was treating the seeds for insects before storing them. This is a question for you. that some composite flowers have worms in the seeds. What do you do about that? Have you seen that?
I have. Um, Actually, I've bought seeds that have insects in them, but I usually try to harvest a little early and then sun dry and for a couple of days, and I haven't. That hasn't been that big of a problem.
Okay. And then,
But and I also I grow in absolute full sun, which uh,
when Dennis
me
says full sun, he means like 15 hours a day or however long the
yeah.
day is. Whatever grows in his yard is 7 feet. Grow the same seed that he uses, he'll give me, and I'll grow it, and I'll get maybe 5 hours of sun. It'll grow to 3 feet, not his seven. So it makes a difference.
But uh, and there's a lot of times in playing in the garden where there's shady spots, you have to have places for things to hide. And harvesting seeds high on the plant too, rather than can make a difference with that.
High on the plant. Okay. And then Chris mentioned that the grass clippings can get moldy, slimy, and and whatnot. But I think your answer is probably going to be sun again.
Well, actually, I mow the grass and I use and I go back and forth so it have rows of it, and then I let it dry out. Then the next day it's completely dry, just like you're making hay, and I drive over it with the sweeper, and it's bone dry. And uh, if you don't mulch deeper than 2 inches or so, when it rains, it goes right through it, so it never gets slimy. If you bag when you cut, you'll have that problem.
Okay, that sounds helpful. I had not thought of treating it like hay, but that is obviously the way we should all go. The other question that people had is about the sale. There's a Broadsman sale that Jim is doing, and Dennis has acquired a number of plants through auction that we are going to be selling at the Greenbelt plant Garden Club plant sale. And we will also offer them at a discount for paying members at our plant exchange. I told Dennis I'd be happy to take the plants from him because he's on the Eastern Shore, and they could be in Silver Spring for a bit while if people want to pick them up. But we'll do pre-orders, and but we're hoping to sell many of them at the Greenbelt Garden Club sale. Dennis, do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, I need to pull up a listing or something. I don't even remember. I know that there is a native honeysuckle, uh, the red honeysuckle. I want to say, can't remember the name of it. There is a pink lilac that is a rebloomer, and a uh, a beauty berry that has red foliage consistently throughout the year. And I can't remember what was the fourth
There's
thing.
Syringia, Spirea,
Oh yeah,
Calicarpa,
there's a nice little spirea, and
and
they were kind of a fluke that I bought them. There was a nursery about 2 hours south of here that went out of business, and they there was a liquidation sale. Most of the lots were huge, and we're talking about maybe 200 or 300 plants, and these are all. There was no more than like 25 or 30 of each one of these, and the honeysuckles are in 2 gallon pots. The rest are in 3 gallon pots. Two of them are proven winners. So they're in that outrageously expensive pot that they get you with. Um, However, I'll get the details out and send it out in an email as to their descriptions sometime soon.
Yeah, I have it here. I just can't seem to get it in the chat quick enough. So, yeah.
But they are the prices on them are really, really good. I mean, I love doing auctions, and I just sort of sat there and played the game for a while. It was but there's nothing in there that I would not be proud to have in my own garden. So that's what and when the prices went too high on anything, I just backed away from it.
Yeah. And then Jim is doing the Broadsman sale, and I know Jim is online. Do you want to mention something about that, Jim? Dronenberg?
Yeah, sorry about that. I was on mute. The deadline is tomorrow. Right now, people's orders are all over the place. I'm going to do what I can to accommodate folks. I haven't talked to Wendy, but I assume that when Wendy will fund it through Carol, like last year. And that's it. Then all that matters is finding a date that we aren't having another 4-inch snowstorm like this coming weekend is supposed to be.
Yes, we're all hoping for not having another 4-inch snowstorm. And then I think that I think we've answered most of the questions, but let me just give it another minute and see if anybody wants to unmute and ask any more questions. If I didn't cover it in your question in the chat, then please do speak up because I must have missed it.
How do you tell if your seeds are viable if you had a package sitting around?
What depending on what it is, if it's something that germinates, if it's an annual, I just use a wet paper towel and a plastic container, and just lay the towel out wet, and then press most of the water out of it. Put 10 seeds or so in it, and flip the towel over so it's over and under it, and just leave it sitting on the kitchen table for a couple of days. And usually you should get germination within 5 to 7 days on practically any annual.
Thanks. This is Janine, by the way. Thanks.
Are there other questions? We've gone a little over our usual length, but people are so engaged. I wanted to make sure everybody had a chance to ask. Okay. Pat, did I cover everything or did I miss something here? I think we got it covered. Okay, well, thank you, Dennis. Thank you all. There are many happy comments in the chat, and I'll share those with Dennis afterwards. I know it's hard to see him when you're talking. And we will have our next event will be the yoga, I think, but we'll send out emails. Barclay's so great about organizing everything, recruiting people, and getting it together. So thank you too, Barclay. And we will post the recording on the YouTube channel once I get it over to Barclay to do that. Thank you all. Thank you, Dennis.
Well, I will just say, now that I'm retired, I'm hanging around here all the time. So if anybody wants to come out and pull weeds, you're more than welcome. I have a date with my hoe in the garden every day.
Well, I don't usually date hoes, but I'm not going to comment on your life, Dennis.
Well, why not? Everybody else does.
All right. Thank you all.
Okay. Thank you.